Old World is a fantastic hybrid strategy game. It takes the Humankind civilization aspects of 4X historical strategy games and merges it together with the likes of Grand Strategy, Crusader Kings 3, and others that focus on characters, dynasties, and families. And in this video, with the Sacred and the Profane Old World DLC having just released, a relatively small but significant release in Old World's life cycle, we're going to take a look at this hidden little gem because I think that a lot of you, regular viewers of the channel, will possibly really enjoy Old World. It's a game that has continued to grow on me. Let's talk about exactly why. Some of the things that it throws into the mix that are a bit different from the rest, like the research tree here. You can see, of course, it's grounded in its ancient world, Old World setting, go figure, but there's a certain randomness to it in their discoverability. As I move just slightly further into the game, I'm appointing a governor to my city and starting to come to terms with the characters, the dynasties, and the relationships that take place in Old World. And then, to cap it off, in my third move here in my turn, I'm harvesting some sweet, sweet honey with one of my scouts. As you can see, it's taken a little bit of everything that you might enjoy about strategy games and kind of merged it into one. And while it's not a perfect title, I think that Old World continues to really be something quite special. Here I'm bumping into the Scythians for the first time and kind of deciding how I want to deal with them. Do we want to maintain a truce, or shall I open up with all-out war and gain some legitimacy in the process? If you're new to Old World, you might be wondering, okay, so I've got these characters and I'm managing geopolitical relationships. Here's a new one with the Vandals. Do we want to pay them off or fight them again? But how does it actually play out, and why are you saying it's so dang special? What's different about it than, say, Civilization? Or why should I not just go play Crusader Kings? Well, one of the ways that you can see it playing out right now as I'm moving the scout over to harvest some horses, delicious, I'm sure we'll make some sandwiches out of them or something later, is the orders system. At the moment, I have 12, and as I sort of look around my units and choose to take actions, like promotions, another neat little system of Old Worlds here, as I think we'll promote this army and probably send them up to deal with some Vandals, it reminds me not just of those smaller systems, but of the sort of broader thing that I'm dealing with, the orders. One order to promote it. Then I use 2 more to walk across here, another order to harvest the resource, and as you can see, my orders, the number of orders next to my character, are falling down as I'm making moves, promotions, attacks, build orders, you name it. Everything inside of a turn, which, by the way, takes place in 1 calendar year, helping to bring in a real life cycle and lifespan to these characters that you're playing. You are, quite literally, the leader of your civilization, and you'll build together, of course, a court or a council. It's starting perhaps with a wife and of course an heir, and then moving our way through into some more tactical or strategic positions. And while Old World does certainly not deliver the depth that something like Crusader Kings 3 might deliver, something I've compared it to a little bit in this video, I would argue it probably shouldn't and doesn't quite need to, because Old World sits in this special place in between the 4X historical strategy and the grand strategy. And you can see as I move through a little bit that it doesn't skimp on anything in particular and tends to deliver on basically every itch you'd kind of want it to scratch. Here I am inside of my capital deciding what to build next. It has these civic projects that can help further development of research or maybe laws in my sort of civics tree, if you will, in my society. Or I could look to build and upgrade individual tiles. Old World's system is fairly intuitive, and by the way, I haven't struggled too much picking it up after not playing it for around 8 months. To give a little bit more context as I explore the world, maybe name a few mountain ranges, big peaks, and crucially move towards some city sites, Old World was created by a team of people, and One in particular, lead developer, I believe, Soren, has extensive experience in, you guessed it, the Civilization franchise, particularly, I believe, around the Civilization 4 era. Combine that with its publisher, Hooded Horse, who publish a load of great indie strategy games, a few of their games on my list this year in particular. They make some exciting stuff. And you've got a fairly talented pool producing this experience. Now, I've talked a little bit about the city building side of things. Let's look at the geopolitics now, with this marriage offer on the table. This is, of course, where I'm deciding who to take as a wife. I could choose to marry a foreigner, a Scythian. I could take someone from House Julii. By the way, quick side note, of the playable houses or nations, I should say, actually, an important distinction of the playable nations. Inside of them, there are 4 familial family houses, and each one delivers their own style of politics, but also buffs for different yields in the game, whether it's your research or your military, your orders, who knows. They can provide all sorts of different things to you, but they also make it a little bit different to manage the geopolitics of it, right? With that marriage proposal, we have to kind of at least piss off somebody, probably multiple parties, knowing how I'm going to manage it. But that's besides the point. Back to the structure of Old World as a grand strategy game, it's not just marriage offers and geopolitical, say, challenges. There's more to it than that. I would argue that one of the most fascinating things about Old World's geopolitics and the grand strategy side is actually how it all plays out over time. You'll notice at the start of the video I've made a few jump cuts through some sort of slightly more boring bits, or maybe where I've been thinking about it something for just a little bit too long. But as you move through and you discover more of these random technologies and start to get a feel for how your characters progress in particular, that's where the grand strategy and the developing a family dynasty part comes in. It's not just that each year is one turn, but as you play through, discover the world, build relationships, you start to fall into what makes Old World really great. I believe, this is correct at the time of recording, there are over 3,000 unique events inside of the game related to characters, exploration, city building, warfare, etc., whatever it may be. And all of them, of course, are inspired by either history or myth. There's a little bit of creative licensing at play here. One of the most impressive things about that, furthermore, is that they continue to update this game like there's no tomorrow. I'm a big fan of strategy games, as you might already know, but more importantly of ones that continue to deliver after they've released. Some will argue that a game should be perfect, should have everything from when it comes out, but I would prefer an experience that I'm relating to and enjoying over the long haul to bring something different, some change, some new experiences. And Old World is doing just that, which is why this is probably a good opportunity to talk about the new DLC, which at the time of releasing this video has just released. The DLC is, to be fair, a fairly small release. At $4.99 US, it's unlikely to break the bank, although times are tough. And it's not a major expansion. It instead delivers, well, actually, why don't I just show you? And I think that, honestly, it kind of packs a punch. Taking a look at the first change, remembering that this is a pack, of course, about the sacred and profane, there are 10 new cult city projects. Here's one on screen. New events, improvements to shrines, and the overall religious gameplay more powerful and more unique. It's a little bit of fun. There are also, speaking of the events that we talked about earlier, an additional 350, which I suppose puts the game at such a ludicrous number that you might not actually be running through the same ones again and again. A common problem hopefully avoided. It also adds clergy characters, new characters to join the court, a further expansion to that kind of grand strategy CK3-esque element that also, of course, bring their own missions, projects, and can benefit you based on the power and basically how your religion feels about you. There are also additional character traits to kind of go along and build a little bit more world and feeling around the clergy and the new roles of the sacred and the profane. And finally, there are some new historical characters, here they are on screen, and a religious descent mechanics. Of note, negative opinion from a religion can lead to the dissent in cities with that religion, which can have lasting consequences. So, overall, the sacred and the profane looks to add more flair, flavour, and depth to the game's religious mechanics. It is, as it self-describes, a kind of a what-if, or at least there are a lot of what-if features inside of it. The goal is that it reflects on a time where religions were young, maybe empires were too, and the known world was reckoning with how competing faiths of old might come in contrast or perhaps collaboration with the new. I think it's a nice historical touch, and for $4.99, if you're a fan of Old World, it's almost certainly a pickup, I feel. A fairly confident grab. If Old World is a little bit new to you, though, maybe it's not quite worth it for you yet. You might want to settle in and get comfortable first. And getting comfortable in the gameplay is exactly what I'd like to do now. To talk a little bit more about Old World gameplay and what makes it so spicy. And for starters, of course, we've already addressed things like how it uses an orders system to not just manage how I'm upgrading my cities, but also how I'm moving my units or promoting them, harvesting resources, basically everything. But there are more nuances to Old World than just that, and how it brings in relationships and events to build kind of a grand strategy, family, dynasty system over top. On the orders system, one thing that is important to note is that there's a little redo button, an undo, if you will, down the bottom left. And if you make an order, you can redo it at any point. In fact, you can redo as many as you like, the whole turn, if you will. At first, I was a little put off by this. I thought, oh, that's a bit easy. Whoa, holding my hand, aren't you? And things like that. But actually, it feels great. Sometimes you move your worker to the wrong spot because you wanted to build a quarry, but actually you realized you needed, I don't know, iron instead of stone, or whatever it may be in whatever strategy game you're playing. And it's nice actually to just have a little redo button to just move that unit back. But it's not just the little quality of life things that add spice and variety to Old World. It's more actually about how it approaches things at a structural level, because there's a lot of thought behind it, a lot of experience, as we talked about in building strategy games too. For example, one of the things that Old World talks about is that in this game, buildings are made of wood and stone. Wood from the woods and stone from our quarries or wherever we're getting it from, maybe. We're stealing it from somebody else. Not this sort of elusive, contrived industry, quote-unquote, resource. Moreover, orders, of course, lead into this as well. They are a resource that's shared. If I'm sitting down to do my paperwork in the city as its governor, I am not also marching across the land at the same time. Old World does a good job to help that play out. Units can still become fatigued, and orders, of course, become depleted year over year. The way that it handles technology, of course, we've talked about that already, but the fact that it is randomized a little bit, it's not a predetermined tree, helps to remove gamification from the game. And you might think, well, that's a little bit dumb, Jumbo. It's a game. Why would I want to remove the gamification from it? But what I mean in particular is that it removes that min-maxing that is, fairly obvious and apparent. There tends to be one way you might approach a tech tree if you want to do it the best. Old World says, no. That's not how this works. That's not how societies evolve in our game. Yes, of course, there's still some kind of structure. You're not going to be launching a nuke or anything anytime soon. But the way that it laces in that randomness, it keeps it so fresh. And of course, it's doing that on lots of different levels as well. When you found a city, you're founding it with one of 4 families, and the ones that you choose will affect not just relationships in-game and which characters are rising to power and which are falling off, but also how you develop your entire strategy, more militaristic or more research and influence-based. That can be determined by the houses and the families that you're bringing in. And now, with Old World's continuously expanding religious system, with cults, expanded shrines, and a more powerful role for religion, not just in people's character traits, but also in actually roles of people in your court or whatever it may be, Old World looks to be adding more nuance now in this system too. And of course, it's old world systems that are what make it great, but also maybe present some challenges for players. I found when I first played Old World around a year and a half ago, it was a little difficult to adjust to. It had honestly a higher learning curve than I had expected. I'd thought going in with some strategy game experience that I would have been alright, and in fairness, of course, I got used to it, but it took me longer than what I thought. There was a lot of complexities under the hood, and a little bit of busy work around the edges. I am fairly confident to say that that's changed a lot for me since the year and a half that Old World came out on not GOG or Steam, but an Epic Games exclusive, releasing on the other platforms later in the piece, and of course with now 2 DLCs on top. It's a great, smooth, well ironed out experience that continues to receive updates. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, and in fact throughout, it's got a lot of experience behind it too, and you can feel that in the little things and the big, right? It's the massive overarching character development, but it's the small things too. City zones, for example, another one that we've talked about and played with a little bit in this video. Something that at first felt a little bit odd to me, that this grand strategy 4X game would force me to place down cities in certain spots. It felt restrictive. And, I feel that. I do. It still kind of makes sense to me that that would feel restrictive to players. On the other hand, though, it feeds in perfectly to Old World's formula. And in many ways, the what could be perceived as slightly restrictive system of having to place your cities on, to be fair, a collection of tiles within certain zones as a limit turns out to be almost a strength. We can already send our scouts across the map to find resources and all sorts of other goodies, maybe name some landmarks, so harvesting resources, at least initially, isn't restricted to cities. But by restricting cities and their locations, and crucially, the number of cities that can appear around the map, Old World takes a different approach to, let's say, Civilization 6. In Civ 6 in particular, playing wide rather than tall, that is, building as many as you can rather than focusing on building a few good ones, tends to be the dominant playstyle. Land grab. Land grab. Old World says, actually maybe just spamming cities everywhere to get that one uranium isn't quite the gameplay style that we're going for, and we're going to use a city site structure instead. And that's of course just one example of the many things that we've talked about in this video, covering Old World, how it's progressed, and its new Sacred and Profane DLC. Thank you so much for joining me in this video, checking out Old World, and I will see you next time.